I'm Luca Giliberti, contributing writer at Gold Derby, joined today by Emmy and Writers Guild Award nominee Kerry Ehrin, who served as the showrunner on the first two seasons of the morning show. So, Kerry, I read that you were at first resistant to incorporating the COVID-19 pandemic into the second season of the show, due to, in large part, the effect it would have on the continuity of the story. So
Yeah.
talk about building that bridge between the dramatic events of the season one finale and the onset of the pandemic as we see it unfold in the second season.
My initial idea for the first two seasons of the show was to have the first season be about turning over the rock where you see all the bugs under it, and that the second season was very much about the bugs scurrying around and like trying to find their footing. And I thought that was important. I didn't want to lose that. COVID obviously was a tidal wave, right? And particularly in a story about news, you can't pretend like it didn't happen or just be like, oh, it's off screen. So we took the arc we were working with and that we had written more than half of the season, and we kind of went back and went, okay, how do you thematically incorporate this looming tidal wave into the story? And it became like almost like with one foot in satire. It is about people who are so consumed with trying to find their footing politically and save their careers and do the right thing and be a good person that they literally are ignoring this dragon that is waiting and is starting to, you know, encroach into their space. That was what we worked from.
Yeah, and building on that, of course, at the center of it all, we have all these emotionally bruised characters who are essentially just thrown into this global health crisis, as we all were in real life. So how much fun or how challenging was it to take the character arcs that you had already mapped out for the second season and then readjust them so that they could play out under these new given circumstances?
I mean, it certainly added a layer of, to me, it added a layer of comedy because of the obliviousness of people. And I think a big part of this show for me has always been about how people are trapped in their own bullshit, you know, and their own ego. And so in that sense, I thought it played off of that really nicely. It's like a little bit of the hierarchy of needs thing, you know, where the bottom is survival and the top is, you know, existential happiness, and people were all up here, but there was like this threat to the survival part, you know, and that was just a very interesting canvas to play on.
Oh, absolutely. And when I asked Bruce Miller, the showrunner of The Handmaid's Tale last year, how he inhabits all his characters and keeps them distinctive on paper, he said that he sometimes listens to recordings of his actors in character. So given the sheer number of characters on the morning show and the breadth of their complexity, how do you inhabit all of them separately and make sure that they don't blend together on the page?
I sometimes think that I don't know. I have an ability to compartmentalize a lot, like to the point where when I was writing Bates Motel and doing a lot of research into that and about like multiple personalities, and I was like, wow, I relate to this really well. So I feel like I am good at connecting with an actor and being able to find that voice inside of me and merge it with my own voice. And it is actually something I really enjoy doing. I love writing for actors.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the benefit of a second season, right? Because you've already
Yeah.
seen these actors inhabit these characters and you already have a feel for these characters. And then you can,
Yeah.
basically build on that awareness. So,
Yeah, but
and
it starts so fast, even in season one.
oh,
Like
right.
once you see someone do a scene, your brain starts to go, oh, okay, so they can do this, and I can push them this way. It's like it's almost immediate, and it really is one of the most joyful parts of the job.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And what is significant about the second season is that layers are peeled back across the board. And what I really loved getting to see was Corey's wall come down a bit, especially since so much of his intentions and frankly his emotions are kept under wraps in the first season, fascinatingly so. So talk a little bit about the process of fleshing out his internal conflict in the second season and how you decided on which layers exactly to peel back.
It's really interesting. I love working with Billy. He's so smart, and I love Corey. Neither Billy nor I, whatever that is, neither one of us wants to know what's at the base, which is really interesting. I never do that, right? So it really though was this idea of there's something down there. We know there's something big, emotionally, psychologically, historically, but he is always like surfing on the top of it. And it's like it kind of bubbles up in different ways. It comes out in different ways. He can contradict himself. He can have random behavior, but it is the most fun playset in the world to get to work with Billy Crudup.
And that's very understandable. He does such an incredible job with this character and his dialogue. I mean, my goodness, what he turns it into, it just takes on a life of its own. And I think that's...
And just such a, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead, please.
I exuberantly agree. He is, and he's just lovely to work with. He's just respectful and inspiring. He's great. And there's one other thing I was going to tell you about Corey. The idea that that character is struggling. I think he's lived a lot of his life, that character, playing the game because he's really good at it. Mm-hmm. And that is where he can hide. He can hide behind that. But I think during the process of meeting Bradley, interacting with her, seeing the whole thing play out with the Mitch Kessler tragedy, like all of the real pain, he becomes less able to just hide behind the facade. Right. And so when he, in season 2, is dealing with Greta Lee, who I just think is amazing and I love her, there's part of him that's just playing the game, and there's part of him that's paternal toward her, that sort of is wanting to kind of show her the way to make things work, but it's within this game and this system that she's kind of pushing against, that she wants to change. So that's a really interesting dynamic, and he has a conscience, and he has a heart, and he's reckoning with that in the season, because being in charge of something is very different from fighting your way up the ladder, because you can just like make fun of everybody. You can denigrate them. You can say they're doing this wrong, but when you're the one sitting in that seat, there's no one else to point to anymore. And it is a very sobering seat to sit in. And I think that that's also part of it for Corey.
Right, and I think Corey is a perfect segue into Bradley, whose character is in many ways recontextualized for viewers this season. But you have said that her family has always sort of been the basis for her character. So I'm curious as to whether that ended up being the launching pad for exploring her sexuality this season.
It did. I mean, the fact that Bradley has always been kind of a great mystery. She's She doesn't have relationships. She kind of jumps around from jobs. She's a volatile emotions that she has to keep in check. So it was interesting. And she has a bad relationship. She didn't have a good childhood. And her mom is clearly not, didn't raise her in a way that made her a strong human. So she was always having to do that herself. I forgot the original question.
Oh no, whether her family just became the launching pad for exploring sexuality or her sexuality in this season.
Because she came from a very conservative, family, very dysfunctional and very conservative, and full of black sheep and events that she is ashamed of, So it was never like an environment where she could bring another issue into the family that might rattle it for some reason. And the other thing is, like, she's 40. She's not 20. And that's a big difference in terms of, like, attitudes toward coming out. So that was part of the dance that we had to do that was very tricky. And we worked really hard on it, because obviously it's a issue that is tender, that we all care about. And getting it right. But that was the genesis, is that she was a person who was never really allowed to be herself.
Right, and I think that the inclusion of Laura Peterson, or the dynamic with Laura Peterson, played by Juliana Margulies, really adds such a specific and fascinating layer to that story as well. Especially because she and Bradley are just so different in many ways. So, how much fun was it marinating those two different personalities as you were developing their relationship and dynamic?
It was really fun, and it was just personally meaningful, because I wanted Bradley to have a strong adult in her life,
right,
so badly. And I adore Alex. Like, she's like a great crazy character, and I totally understand her, and I know her heart, but she was not always great for Bradley, and I thought, and so having this really cool, mature woman who'd done the work, see in Bradley all the potential she had, if she could just kind of step out of herself a little bit and stop hiding. And that goes across the board. That isn't even about her sexuality. It's about everything about her, and so that was just a very beautiful, gratifying, almost parental presence in her life. And I think in most relationships, we become each other's parents, It just depends on the day. Who's the parent? Who's the child?
Hey, that's true. I mean, and I really think it's such a fascinating relationship. Also, they bring different energies. Juliana and Reese, they just bring such different energies, and I think it really comes together well. And it's just such a joy to see the two actors as well just play off of each other.
They're good together. I mean, they do have a really good chemistry.
Absolutely. And we're going to shift gears here a bit, but of course we have to talk about episode 7, La Amaravita, which you and your co-writer, Scott Troy, were nominated for an individual WGA award. This episode really is a dance, literally and figuratively, between Alex and Mitch, and how they are individually dealing with the fallout of Mitch's actions. So naturally, the emotions are all over the place. But what was important to you and Scott to really punctuate as you were essentially capping off this long existing relationship?
I think the messiness of it, the dysfunctional messiness of both their relationship and their images of themselves in the world right now. And it really was about closure for Alex, because the whole first season was about how close she had been to him, and then he just falls through the floor and disappears in her life. And she's very angry at him, and he's doing stuff in the first season that she gets very angry at. And so their last encounter was so hateful and ugly.
Right.
And I think on some level she needed the closure, because it's a very complicated situation to have been the partner of someone and kind of the work wife and the best friend of someone who did these things, and maybe you even kind of knew he was doing these things, but you didn't see them in this light.
Right.
And then suddenly you see it all in this light, and it's like, do I hate this person? Like, is this person I thought he was gone? Is that person not exist? So I think she's in that area of trying to find her footing with what he means to her and who she is as a person, you know, how she contributed to it, or, you know, if you can still love somebody after they have done horrible things. It was all of that, and it's all messy, and it isn't answerable. They're not things you can have answers for. Certainly not for me.
Oh, absolutely not. And that's what makes it that entire episode really interesting to just see, you know, where they're coming from. And I really enjoyed the messiness of it all. And this is where I want to mention Bates Motel, which you were a co-showrunner of, and which is one of my absolute favorite shows. Due in large part to how the moral ambiguity of the characters is handled, or was handled. I'm obviously not going to try to liken Mitch with Norman or Norma, but with Mitch, how did you walk that fine line of exploring redemption and being truthful to what he was going through in his head, and not exonerating any of his actions at the same time?
It was very carefully is the answer. But I have always been, like, one of my favorite books from teenagehood was Crime and Punishment, which is a Russian novel about a guy who kills his landlady, and the whole book is about whether or not he can be redeemed. And he really shouldn't be. It was a horrible crime. But the journey of that is fascinating. The journey of a person wondering, can I forgive myself for this thing that I did? Am I, you know, who am I? What kind of a person am I? Do you have any capacity to do good anymore? Or do you just have to say, no, I'm just bad, and I'm like, the world's better without me? Like, where do you go from there? You know, and again, not something I can answer. It's like, maybe after I die and I'm on some other more enlightened plane. But I think in life, there are so many of these incredibly complicated, tragic conundrums where I do believe most people want to wake up in the morning and believe they are a good person.
Oh, yes.
I do believe that. And I do believe that we all lie to ourselves about things that we do wrong, you know, and that is part of being a human. And I kind of wanted to look at that.
Oh, yeah. We lie to ourselves. We make up excuses for ourselves, I think.
We write our own story, and absolutely. Then sometimes the truth bites you in the ass.
Oh, definitely. And to wrap things up, I would like to focus on Alex and the destination at which she arrives at in the finale, which you wrote. Obviously, she contracts COVID and has pretty severe symptoms, but you actually said that her fever is almost representative of the fire that burns her. So could you elaborate on that and talk about how she, who has been trying to escape blame for forever, basically, finally gets to a point where she is done apologizing for herself, as she says?
Yeah, I feel like Alex represents to me being a woman in business. From when I started in this industry in the 80s, in the second half of the 80s. So I've seen so many different phases of it. And I think that for people Alex's age, they came up in a world where you kind of always had to be the good girl, be the person that can get along with the guys, that can, you know, that can do above and beyond, you always were doing more, I think. And I think that there's a certain aspect of that is presenting a certain way. And I think she's a super driven person. She's super, she wants success. And I think she worked really hard to get it. And I think when Mitch disappeared and the world kind of opened up for her, the floor fell out from under her. It put her into a tailspin of, what the fuck am I doing? Who am I? Like, I've devoted all my life to my career, and I have a horrible marriage. I'm not close to my daughter. It's like it opened up all these things in her. And then she kind of has a nervous breakdown on air and ends up blurting this shit out, and then gets made into a feminist hero, which she also doesn't feel like she deserves. So she is trying to reconcile all of that. And I think there's a lot of self-loathing and judgment in her. And I think when she gets to the end and she's like, I'm not going to apologize, I think that's about herself. It's like, I'm going to quit beating myself up. This is who I am. Going to do the best I can going forward.
Oh, absolutely. It was such a interesting way to end the season. I really just like the progression of her arc. And
she's amazing.
Absolutely. Kerry, it was such a pleasure talking to you today. And I should say again, congratulations on your 2 WGA nominations for this season.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you.